Hello and welcome to a Monday Night Football Showdown edition. My name is Adam Levitan, joined by the Showdown King himself, Cody Main, joined by the Dinkbot, Drew Dinkmeyer. It is a Lamar Jackson slate. Cody has done a lot of work on Lamar Jackson slates in his peak virginity of Showdown study. Cody, this must be an exciting day for you.
Ravens slates are some of the best slates that we get from a Showdown perspective, but they're also some of the most difficult because the million-dollar question is simply, do we play Lamar Jackson at captain or not? So I'm sure that's what the focus of this show will be. I'm repping the shirt, not bad for a running back. Shout out to RotoWare. I think that's what this whole slate comes down to, whether we play Lamar at captain or not.
Okay. Drew, hello from New York City. What's going on?
Not much, man. Just trying to get back to even, That's what Monday showdowns are for. If you have a losing Sunday, you just fire in and you just try to get back to even,
Drew is also in the NBA streets. By the way, Drew, on the horizon, 1 month away, roughly,
oh my God,
will be the NBA season. Excited for that, of course. Drew and the team will be covering that. We'll have more news about that soon. But yeah, Drew is already in the NBA streets. Leone, no time for yard work. A lot of time building out the NBA's backbone. Anyways, let's get to the matter at hand here, Cody. Generally speaking, give the people some Lamar 101. What have we seen on Lamar slates before? What do you expect to see tonight? What does the field do? Where can we gain leverage on the Lamar situation?
Yeah, so I was just doing some looking before the slate last night, and I mean, basically what you find on any Lamar Jackson slate is he's by far and away the most owned captain, and it's really not even close. Even dating back to last year's showdown with the Chiefs, where we obviously have Travis Kelce and Tyreek Hill and Patrick Mahomes, he doubled up the next closest in captain ownership, which is wild for those two teams. I firmly expect that tonight. In fact, I'm kind of nervous that we might even be projecting his captain ownership a little light. So it really makes it difficult. You right from the beginning, you have a decision point on what you want to do with Lamar Jackson. Now, it's a little bit more difficult for anyone that's building 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lineups. If you're building a portfolio, I think you definitely need to have some Lamar Jackson, unless you just want to take a hardline stance that he's not going to be in the optimal lineup or the optimal captain. But we found that it's pretty difficult to get unique with Lamar because of the way that he scores his points. Most of his production comes from rushing, and the field is basically correct in handling Lamar Jackson. They're pairing him with one of his receivers, which is something that we obviously talk about on main slate. People are doing that in Showdown as well at about a 50% clip. So what it does give us the ability to do is take some stands if we think Lamar's a vast majority of his production comes through his legs. So if he scores 2 or 3 rushing touchdowns and just doesn't have very much production through the air, we can pair him with no pass catchers. Or if we think the ball gets spread around a little bit more, and certainly with issues in the backfield, maybe they're a little bit more pass heavy today, we can pair him with 2 or more pass catchers. And the field did that at like 29% over the past 2 seasons. So there is some leverage in building through our Lamar captain lineups, but those lineups are just from the very beginning, because we're rostering a 30% plus owned captain. They're just going to be very much more difficult to get unique from the very jump.
I mean, one thing I was looking forward to this year was better weaponry for Lamar Jackson, and maybe he could expand his throwing that way. But then you go down and you lose Rashad Bateman. I thought J.K. Dobbins had a chance to play reasonably in the pass game, even if not on a high volume. And so what happens then is we lose those guys. We lose Rashad Bateman. We lose J.K. Dobbins. So, Drew, how do you think Lamar plays it tonight? Is there room for Lamar to have a big throwing day? I think is a big question, because that will lead you to, should you be pairing with wide receivers, and how many pass catchers should you be pairing him with?
Yeah, and not only did he lose Bateman and Dobbins, also lost Nick Boyle, a favored second tight end target. Also lost a lot of training camp time with Marquise Brown, who was sidelined throughout training camp with injuries. So, he was throwing in practices to Patrick Ricard was playing wide receiver in practices, and he's a fullback. So it's just you wonder, especially after seeing kind of, the Falcons lay an egg yesterday after they barely played their guys in preseason at all and had no chemistry whatsoever. You kind of wonder if that's going to impact the passing game tonight. I think if it's going to be through multiple pass catchers, I tend to think with Lamar, you want to be looking at the tight ends, just because he works the middle of the field so aggressively. And it's one of the ways you can get differentiation and unique leverage on the field. And that's with a guy who is is an interesting athletic tight end that has bounced around the league a little bit in Josh Oliver, who's super, super cheap and like fits the Lamar builds from a double stack component, from a salary component. Like one of the other challenging things about this slate is the salaries are pretty efficient. I mean, Waller's super expensive. Getting Lamar and Mark Andrews and Marquise Brown in there requires a little bit of manipulation. So it's a challenging slate, but I think that's really, for me, if I'm attacking Lamar doubles, I'm trying to do it largely through the tight end spot, and that's where I'm going to try to get leverage on the field.
To be clear, the question isn't whether or not to play Lamar. I think Lamar is going to be in every lineup that you have. It's whether to use Lamar in captain or not, and who to pair him with, and that's obvious. We're playing Lamar in every lineup, no matter what. Let's talk about the other side, quarterback, real quickly before we get back to the Ravens stuff. Derek Carr, Derek Carr has had some really big games. This is not the best matchup for him, I don't think, but he's had some really big games in the past. I think Vegas is going to play well tonight, and I actually think Vegas ends up winning the game, but I don't know necessarily it's going to be definitely through Derek Carr or how it's going to go. How do you think about Derek Carr and the Raiders pass game, Cody?
Yeah, I wanted to get excited about Derek Carr before I really dove into the slate and started getting through my MME set because, I kind of want to build, as we've talked about, those 2-4 underdog heavy builds, maybe even 5-1 with just Lamar. But I wanted to get excited about the Raiders and the Raiders pass game because of the options that they have that are pretty cheap in Edwards and Ruggs and guys that we'll talk about. But as I was building lineups and running MME sets, I was getting a lot of Derek Carr just naturally. And his base projection and his price comparison to guys priced around him in Waller and Andrews on the other side, I think naturally for anyone that's using an optimizer, I think he's going to get into a lot of lineups. I think another guy that we might even be a little bit light on his ownership, as long as perception doesn't keep it down, is Derek Carr, and that could also tail on the captain ownership as well. So yeah, coming into the slate, I wanted to be excited about it because, the thought that the Raiders can win this game and they can do it on the arm of Derek Carr and some of those pass catching options that we like. But man, I just think he's going to be pretty high owned because he kind of fits into that build, being cheaper than Waller. Jacobs doesn't have a very good price, so I just think that the ownership is going to get naturally bumped up.
We saw on Thursday, Drew, the 4-2 underdog, which you talked about, get there. In other words, Dak, Lamb, Cooper, and one other random Cowboy, Zerline, or whoever else it was what you needed. I like 4-2 underdog. Again, I'm just not sure it's as clean with who to do it with. What do you think about Derek Carr and captain tonight and the 4-2 underdog stuff?
Yeah, so I think the 4-2 underdog stuff is particularly interesting when you're going up against the Ravens, who are so run heavy, because I think there's actually multiple game scripts that the 4-2 underdog can work here. One game script that it works really well, obviously, is if the Raiders play really well and they score a lot of points, right? If they do that, it's probably going to be through the air. It's probably going to have a decent bit of reception volume. And we've also seen historically, when Lamar has been forced to play from behind, sometimes like the pass rush just being able to pin his ears back and whatnot has led to a lot of inefficiency from him. And on the other side, if Lamar or the Ravens rushing offense is extremely efficient and they are just able to move the ball up and down the field running, a lot of that production is going to get condensed into, Lamar or Tyson Williams or Latavius Murray, whoever's in the backfield, right? Because those plays, every time you're running efficiently, only one player is getting points. And so there's situations where Baltimore can play from ahead consistently in this game, and 4-2 Vegas stacks can still win because of the reception volume that you're getting while they're kind of playing catch up. So I actually think it's an even stronger situation than last week, especially when you consider how the field is most likely to build. I think the field is even more likely to build on the favorite side of the spectrum this week than on the Thursday game. So I think there's a lot of things that make the at least four Raiders side really, really appealing.
Yeah, Tim asks, is 4-2 underdog to MME only or in single entry? No, I played the 4-2 underdog in the small field stuff on Thursday. I think you can definitely play it there. And people's, in the smaller field stuff, people are going to lean towards favorite stuff even more. So I think in single entry, it could make even more sense to go 4-2 underdog. Bit of news on the running back stuff. First of all, Josh Jacobs was added to the injury report on Saturday with an illness. Sounds like he's fine, fully expected to play. We do have Kenyon Drake siphoning off a pretty decent share of his receiving work, especially. And then on the other side, the Ravens did not promote Le'Veon Bell. They did not promote Devontae Freeman off the practice squad. They will go with Tyson Williams. They will go with the backups of Trenton Cannon, who's been mainly a special teamer. I think that's what they signed him for, to play special teams, and Latavius Murray, who was just signed on Thursday night. So I think Tyson is an interesting conversation, Cody. Dude can play, man. I mean, me and Cody did preseason together, and we played Tyson, I think, almost every slate.
Yeah.
I mean, dude can play. His athletic measurables are awesome. If there was ever a slate for the Ravens to unleash a back for 20 plus touches, this would be it. I don't know how much Latavius Murray is going to play. We haven't projected somewhere between 5 or 6 carries right now. I don't know. There's a really wide range of outcomes there. So I think Tyson's going to be pretty popular. People are definitely on it. We have him 40.4% owned. What do you think about the running backs on both sides?
Yeah, I like Tyson. And as you mentioned, we were just talking about him in the preseason, and we were talking about some of the guys that we'll get to at wide receiver and tight end, and one guy that Drew's already mentioned in the preseason. So the rest of this offense behind the studs is really kind of a mess. But this backfield's been a mess for a couple of years, and this might actually be the cleanest that it's been, given all the injuries that they have. It seems crazy that we're already into the end of week 1, and we're still trying to kind of gauge from coaches and beat reporters what workloads are going to be. We don't really have any sort of idea of what is coming out of Baltimore tonight, but I feel pretty confident that they feel comfortable giving Tyson a bulk of the workload. And I don't expect him to be low owned as a flex option, but if you are talking about trying to get leverage off of Lamar Jackson, we know that a lot of his rushing production comes from rushing touchdowns. If we think that those rushing touchdowns come from go to Tyson instead of Lamar, I think it's a easy leverage position there. And even if he is owned as a flex option, I think his captain ownership will still remain pretty low.
Yeah. Tyson is 1,600 less than Josh Jacobs. And I mean, nobody wants to play Josh Jacobs, right? Especially when he's 1,600 more than Tyson. Josh Jacobs got such a bad rap in the season-long streets that he was like, I saw him going like 6th, 7th round of season-long before it was all over. I mean, I think our ownership projection on Josh Jacobs could even end up being high here at 30%. Do you have any interest in playing Raiders backs, Drew? It seems like their salaries are pretty elevated.
Yeah, it is. It's a little bit tougher. I'm a little bit interested in Kenyon Drake a little bit more than Josh Jacobs, just because I think if the Raiders play well, I think it's going to be more through the air than it is on the ground. I just think, Baltimore's just been a tough team to run against for a while. So I think that would mean that Kenyon Drake in the passing game, which they've talked about all during training camp, that they would use him more than just as, a third down back. So I think there's going to be lots of times where Drake and Jacobs are actually on the field together, and Drake is kind of lined up in a wide receiver type position. But I'm not excited about either guy in particular, just Drake a little bit more than Jacobs because of the cost and because of the role that I think will be a little bit more friendly for this particular matchup.
Yep. Okay, let's go to wide receivers and tight ends here. Cody, obviously we have Darren Waller with the highest projection and Mark Andrews with the highest projection. It's interesting. Showdown slate doesn't really matter because it's positionless, but it's just crazy. We found the two teams where the best projection on both teams is at the tight end position. I mean, they like Bryan Edwards. They signed John Brown to a $3.5 million contract and then cut him because Bryan Edwards iced him. I think they need a second-year leap from Henry Ruggs. Hunter Renfrow, to me, they call him third in Renfrow. That's his nickname on the Raiders. He's going to get his targets. As you can see, he's our best value relative to price here tonight. What are you thinking about the tight ends and wide receivers for tonight, Cody?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of ceiling to be had on both teams from the wide receiver and tight end position. As we talked about on Baltimore, if the target share just gets funneled to these guys because there's nobody else behind Mark Andrews and Marquise Brown, even in a run-heavy offense, we could see some big scores out of Mark Andrews and Marquise Brown. We've seen them in the past. So if somebody is going to beat Lamar Jackson, obviously if it's coming from his own team, it's likely going to be because the target share is condensed and he just doesn't do as much with his legs. So I do like both Mark Andrews and Marquise Brown. I think as Silva noted in matchups, the matchup for Mark Andrews is a little bit better for Marquise Brown. I like that quite a bit. So given the $9,000 price tag, from a medium perspective, he doesn't project all that well. So ownership, I think, in the captain position might be held in check. And same thing for Marquise Brown, big play hitter. Hopefully he's back and healthy. And Waller has got probably the biggest ceiling, in terms of like 95th percentile ceiling on the slate. So if he hits a true ceiling outside of Lamar Jackson, we could see a pretty big score from Waller. We've seen in these games where target shares just get condensed around him, where he's got 45% of the team's targets in a single game. So I wouldn't be shocked if we saw a big score out of Darren Waller either.
I like to play wide receiver and captain. When I'm making single entry lineups for Showdown, I almost always play wide receiver in captain. In this case, I would put tight end into the mixes there as well, though. Drew, what do you think about small field stuff, single entry, 3-max playing wide receiver or tight end over Lamar Jackson in captain tonight? Can we get there?
Yeah, I think you can, but I think it's just such a weird slate. I think it actually would be easier to get there in a high scoring slate. In these low scoring slates, one of the challenges, and I expect this to be lower scoring because I expect there to be lower reception volume. Both teams, are teams that prefer to run the ball when the game is competitive and tight. It just makes it so that every score is so much more impactful at the quarterback position in terms of being able to separate. So I'm still torn on whether to go with Lamar captain or not. If I didn't, I would probably go Mark Andrews tonight.
Mm-hmm.
I think he's had more time working with Lamar during the course of the preseason. As much as I love Marquise Brown, as much as I'm willing to continue to lose bets with you on Marquise Brown, I would probably go Andrews in the captain spot if I wasn't going Lamar tonight.
Yep. What about these back end Baltimore wide receivers? People are asking about Sammy Watkins, Cody, Duvernay. I think that actually Proche, I don't know between Proche, Duvernay, and Tylan Wallace. I think Tylan Wallace has the best talent. I think Proche might be ahead, but Duvernay's been there. And then obviously Watkins is going to play every snap. But man, I mean, he did nothing for a long time with Patrick Mahomes. It's hard to see him exploding here, but he at least has long time ago elite draft capital. What about the back end Baltimore wide receivers?
Yeah, I think that's where this slate really gets interesting when we're talking about how to pair up Captain Lamar teams and get different. Drew mentioned Mark Andrews. If we want to pair him with 2 pass catchers, you could do the Mark Andrews plus Josh Oliver route, which I think is interesting. But some of these back end wide receivers, they're just going to have to play because this team runs enough 3 wide receiver sets. They only have Marquise Brown and Sammy Watkins as, quote unquote, every down players. But these guys like Duvernay and Tylan Wallace and Proche are going to have to mix in. So one thing that I'm trying to do and get a percentage of my portfolio tonight in my MME set is to just have a run where I've got at least I want to pair Lamar with 2 Ravens pass catchers, and I want 1 to be Mark Andrews or Marquise Brown, and then I want 1 to come from this other group of Duvernay, Proche, Oliver, Tylan Wallace. That way I don't have Lamar captain teams with Duvernay and Proche because that's not likely to happen. But at least I've got that raw projection from Marquise Brown and Mark Andrews, and then one of these lower owned guys. I think that's a very quick way to ensure that you're different as far as parsing which one I want to have the most of. I'm just going to lean on projections. I think they're all fairly low owned. Even Watkins is going to be pretty low owned, but it's going to be tough to try and peg which one it is. So if you're doing single entry, 3-max, even the 20-max, go with who you feel best about if you're doing Lamar double stacks. But in MME sets, I would be trying to mix in quite a few of these guys.
Kyle says it's like a preseason slate for the Ravens. It's true. I mean, we talked about on the preseason shows, we talked about Tylan Wallace. We talked about Proche. I think we actually had Proche as the top wide receiver play one night, and we definitely had Tyson as the top wide receiver play, the top running back play a bunch. Okay. Let's move to the age-old question, Dink, which I know everybody struggles with. Is defense in play? Is kicker in play? Should we be playing defense and kicker? Because man, I mean, on the Thursday slate, Zerline, I think may have been in the optimal. I can't remember.
Yeah, he was.
Yeah. So what do you think about defense and kicker on this slate?
Yeah, Zerline got there despite shanking balls left and right. But that was a slate where it's interesting. That was a slate where the kicker kind of got there because there was so much scoring volume that allowed him to rack up points, but also the scoring volume was concentrated in the most expensive guys. And so that's really the situation when you get kickers. You get either 2 instances, high scoring games with studs who go nuts. Think back to like that Rams-Chiefs game that was a primetime game years ago that had it was games in the 50s. Think about the Tampa Bay-Dallas game last week. Or when you get kickers in the optimal lineups is when you get really low scoring games where the field goals actually move the needle a lot. And by low scoring games, I don't mean necessarily points on the board. I mean fantasy points. And on DraftKings specifically, you get a lot of fantasy points through receptions. And so teams with high pass rates, generally high pass rates and cheap options that are going to be on the field are going to push kickers away a little bit. But low pass rates and and again, not a lot of strength in cheap options, and a slate that's priced pretty appropriately. I think the kickers are back in play. I'm not as excited about the defenses here. Defenses, once again, what I'm looking for when I'm playing defenses in Showdown is I want to see they're going to be underutilized by the field, but also I kind of want to be in games where there's going to be a lot of pass attempts. I want my defenses to be able to potentially score points, and the easiest way for them to score points is through racking up sacks, generating interceptions. That's where you get the big plays that potentially turn into touchdowns. It's not when teams are just running dive plays over and over again. Your fantasy defense can't really generate upside that way. So I'm in a position where I think kickers are in play on the slate, but I'm not particularly excited by the defenses.
Cody, do you agree with that? What do you think about kickers and defenses tonight? And I want to leave some time, 5 or 6 minutes for questions tonight. I think people have some good ones. But what do you think about kicker and defense?
Yeah, I think Drew nailed it on kickers, especially like if you look at just the way the salary breaks down in this slate too, there's just kind of a void in that median range of the salary where, between like 3K and 5K where there's just nothing. And then we have these really cheap options that are really thin, the sub $2,000 options that we just mentioned that are really thin, really unlikely to get there. Maybe one of them does. But I think he kind of nailed it with the game environment that if these guys just get a couple field goal attempts, it's going to be fairly easy or easier than in some of these other game scripts for them to crack optimal lineups. And then on defense, for me, it really comes down to the projection versus perception, because I don't think the Ravens defense projects all that well. And Drew nailed that too with so many rushing attempts from the Raiders, so many rushing attempts from the Ravens offense that there's not going to be a whole lot of opportunities for sacks and turnovers and touchdowns. But I'm really curious if our ownership projection comes in light on the Ravens defense, which would want me to be underweight even more, just given the perception of the Raiders offense and Derek Carr and John Gruden and the perception of the Baltimore defense and how good they are, even though they don't necessarily project all that well from a point per dollar perspective.
Go ahead and put some questions, guys, in the chat here. We'll get to a few before we get out of here to make our own lineups. Before we do that, 2 things. First, corporate has told me, smash the like button and hit subscribe. This is free. We're doing this out of the goodness of our hearts. Hit subscribe. It's free on YouTube. We're working as best as we can. You see, we're upped our thumbnail game to bring you guys as much as we can here on YouTube. Also, if you want content like this for every single game, all our shows, all of our takes, all of our analysis, all you do is you go up here to the subscribe tab. You go to subscribe NFL products. You'll find weekly and monthly on there as well if you just want to try it out. All right. Let's get to some questions here tonight. Let's see what the people have. Chris says that Justin owes him 48,900 and 48,000. I messed that up, but 49,800. Justin Tucker owes Chris 49,800. If I were to stack my punt returner with my defense, who is it that I want? We're getting, deep.
Is this Peter Jennings?
Yeah, let's CSU Rams.
What is going on? Is this his alternate account?
The double dip is in the chat. I actually don't know the answer to that, but I'm sure a quick Google search could find you for that. I think on full slates, the double dip has been proven to be mathematically incorrect to play. The double dip. I'm actually not sure about Showdown if it's been proven bad or not. Do you know, Drew?
It just happens so infrequently. Kick return touchdowns in the NFL rarely ever happen anymore. I would say that, if there's an environment for it to be valuable, it's a really low scoring slate on the whole, because usually the punt returner, the kick returner, if they score a touchdown, that's 6 points. That's great. But that might not be enough to win a lot of Showdown slates. I think this one is actually one that it would. But again, it's such an unlikely event in terms of how often you get special teams touchdowns in the NFL these days.
John says, if going with a 4-2 Raider build, is it Captain Carr or is it still Captain Lamar? It's an interesting question, Cody. What do you think about the best 4-2 Raider build?
Best 4-2 Raider build, I think, would be captain one of the pass catchers. Obviously, Waller would take the cake, but I still think you can mix in Ruggs and Bryan Edwards a little bit. They're going to be pretty extremely low owned at captain, so I think you can mix them in, but it wouldn't be either of those. It would be Captain Waller for me. Yeah.
Yes, we will do our flag plans. Shout out to me last week, Amari Cooper flag plan. Dink went with the OJ Howard flag plan.
The air ball. I would say it can't get worse, but I might go for another air ball this week, so we'll see.
Saul Goodman asked if fielding 150, what percent would be 4-2 Vegas? We talked about this a little bit on Thursday. Dink, what do you think about how much 4-2 Vegas tonight for you at 150?
I think last week I went with about 35%. I feel this is a little bit of a stronger position to even consider using it. So I might be up around 45% this week. I think it's one of the unique ways to create leverage on the field. I think there aren't a lot because it's a tight range of outcomes for most of the scorers on this slate. So yeah, I'll probably be in that 40 to 45% range is my guess.
Alex, we appreciate you as well. Thanks for tuning in, buddy. All right, let's see. Matt says, how do you input PSM model data into Showdown slates? You don't. People who are breaking the PSM actually don't play Showdown. It's more for divergence like Dink and Cody. Right. From Christian, if you play Tyson and captain, would you want Lamar? Seems like bad correlation, but hard to fade Lamar. That's an interesting question. Cody, what do you think?
I think one of the subscribers posted a nice visual in Discord actually, and I think it was correct on more slates than it was not to play last season. That is to play Lamar with his running back and vice versa. So no, I have no issues playing Tyson captain with Lamar and flex. His raw points is just going to be so damn high on this slate that it's going to be hard for him not to be in the optimal, I think.
Dink, Oliver and Andrews together. I know you like Josh Oliver tonight. Can you play Josh Oliver and Mark Andrews together?
Not in a 4-2 Raiders underdog build. I think that is like if Oliver and Andrews are both kind of hitting it together, I think it's likely through a scenario where they're scoring touchdowns, and then you start to get into a situation where Lamar is probably going to be hard to avoid. I think a lot of the 4-2 Raiders builds that I would be looking at would be Lamar and a pass catcher, or Lamar and Tyson with the other four, not necessarily two individual pass catchers from the Ravens.
Is it bad to play both kickers, Cody? Both kickers on this slate?
I kind of have one macro rule that I don't play more than two kickers or DSTs. And DSTs, I should say. So like max two of that group, kickers and DSTs. So I guess with the way that I build, I would be okay with landing on two kickers in one lineup.
You agree there, Dink? Two kickers is okay?
Yeah, I think it's okay. And especially in this type of game environment, heavy run potential from both teams just limits the overall points scored. And so if you get into a game that has two field goals from each kicker, all of a sudden, those teams could certainly float up into the optimal.
DFS Cash has thoughts on Henry Ruggs with him moving into an alpha role. I'm not convinced he's moving into the alpha role. I think they like Brian Edwards. I think they like Hunter Renfrow. And I think that even Zay Jones might mix in a little bit. But the alpha is still Darren Waller. And so I think Henry Ruggs gets there on a big play. I don't think all of a sudden you're going to load up 7, 8, 9 targets on Henry Ruggs. That would really shock me. But yeah, in terms of guys who can break this slate, obviously we have two big candidates, Marquise Brown and Henry Ruggs. If you want to get excited about Henry Ruggs, go ahead and Google or YouTube Henry Ruggs basketball highlights, and you'll get yourself to a full 3.9. All right, couple more here. Can you use Raiders kicker in a build with Ravens captain or vice versa? General principle. I think that seems fine to me. What do you think, Dink?
Yeah, so I think that, does that mean Ravens defense as the captain? Like that, it's a little bit of a confusing question. If it's Ravens defense as the captain, I generally don't have the opposing kicker. I make rules to not group it out entirely, but I negatively correlate it because I think if the defense is doing so well, it's because they've scored touchdowns, they're putting their team ahead. The other team's going to be less likely to kick field goals and different things like that. If it's just any Raven in a captain spot with a Raiders kicker, I think that's totally fine.
Single entry for me, my favorite captain would be Darren Waller, I think. But we'll get to flag plans in a minute here. Just a couple more questions before we get to the flag plans. Chris wants to know about cash build. I don't really recommend playing cash on Showdown. I don't really do it. I don't think that there's big edges to be had there. I didn't really think about cash line. I don't know if you have, Dink, or do you even think that playing cash in Showdown is worth it?
I think in all sports, there's probably spots where if you're really good at picking opponents and really good at picking stakes, that head-to-head in cash and can be valuable. I do think on Showdown the edges are thinner and they're smaller, but I mean, I know plenty of people who are grinding really low stakes head-to-heads and it's working out for them. If you're playing cash tonight, I would say you start with Lamar Jackson, a captain. You're probably playing at least one of Carr, Waller. You're probably playing some kickers. Like that's kind of the route that you're going tonight. It's not a pretty cash lineup by any means.
Don wants to plant his flag on Tylan Wallace. I like him, man. Dude can play.
I love it.
I don't know.
I love potential airball flag plants. They make me feel right at home. So Don, shout out to you.
I was gonna say I don't know how much he's gonna play tonight, but dude can play. All right. Couple more here. Ruggs failed the PSM. I'd like to see the data on that, but I think you might be onto something there. Kyle, how do we not play Brian Edwards before his emergence? Yeah, there's a lot of big Brian Edwards fans out there, man. I do think Brian Edwards can play. Jerry just barked at Brian Edwards.
First flag plant. First flag plant
in a big way. All right, guys. Everybody's giving out their own flag plants. Sammy Watkins flag plants. Miles Boykin's not going to be active for this game, but he's going to be a flag plant for somebody out there as well. Okay. All right. Let's get to our own flag plants here. Drew, why don't you redeem yourself from the OJ Howard airball and go ahead with your flag plant?
Yeah, I'm debating whether to just lean right into this bit or not, because the guy that I honestly will have more leverage than anyone on the field is going to be Josh Oliver tonight, which is definitely another shot at a pure airball. So that's what I'm. We're going to go big airballs and go Josh Oliver as the flag plant tonight.
Josh Oliver, yet another team preseason guy, and also Josh Oliver won first team all preseason in my annual awards. Definitely, dude is an athlete, man, and he can play. Again, I question exactly how much he's going to play tonight.
We just got to beat 6 snaps. If we beat 6 snaps, we're moving in the right direction.
All right, Cody, your flag plant.
All right, I'm going to stick at the tight end position for the Ravens. I think Mark Andrews is the optimal captain tonight in large field tournaments.
Ooh, baby.
Okay, both Ravens tight ends. I am going to go with Mr. Brian Edwards. I love to play wide receivers at captain, and because Brian Edwards costs $600 more than Henry Ruggs, I actually think that this gap between Ruggs and Edwards on ownership might be a little bit wider. People are excited about Ruggs. They think he can break the slate, which obviously I just said he can, but I think Brian Edwards is the guy who is way likelier, the candidate for his ceiling of targets to be closer to 8 or 9. I'd be surprised if Henry Ruggs got there tonight, so I will go with Brian Edwards. All right. Appreciate you guys hanging out ahead of this Vegas versus Ravens showdown slate. Be sure you be sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel. If you are not subscribed to Establish the Run, you are making a huge mistake. We just go 8-0 on props like it's absolutely nothing. Easy game. I expect us to actually go roughly 244-0 over the course of the season on props. All right. For producer Adam, for Drew, for Cody, I am Adam. Good luck, everybody.